Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. On the behalf of Evolve Pune, I welcome you all on our 11th session of this Gita Essence series, which is Universal Form. So we had 1.5 journey so far, 1.5 week journey so far in Bhagavad Gita series, which is Gita Essence, where Prabhuji is talking about one chapter each day. So far we have covered how Arjuna doubt leads to speak Lord about the basic facts of a nature. He started opening the concept one by one, where he discussed about Nishkam Karma Yoga. He discussed about how to uh, sacrifice, what is basic of meaning of sacrifices in the actual word, and then he's speaking about himself. He speaks about what is the loving relationship between a devotee and Lord. So in the 7th chapter, which is Bhakti Yoga of Bhagavad Gita, the 7th to 12th chapter, we started focusing on the relationship between Lord and devotees. So 7th chapter we discuss how Lord is there. Then 8th chapter we discuss about inevitable question, which is death. 9th chapter was a confidential knowledge on the devotion. 10th chapter we discuss how Lord perceives everywhere, how one can perceive Lord in everything, how he sits in best of everything, be it a living or non-living. And now comes the 11th chapter. So if you see, 10th chapter is a theory. Now 11th chapter is going to be the practical of 10th chapter. So the universal form in this chapter, we're going to learn how Krishna can manifest into some other forms which is all pervading, all omnipotent, omniscient. And now you will have some questions around this form as well, like why this form, how God comes into this, and if there is another form, then which one is the best? So for all of these questions and to the journey of this universal form, I now hand over to our esteemed speaker, His Grace Madan Sundar Prabhu, to take through journey of this chapter 11 and dispel our doubts like Krishna does it for Arjuna and for all living beings. Over to you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Shik. Om Ajnanatirantasya Jnananjana Shalaka Chakshurunmilitam Tasmai Shri Namah Namo Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharin Nirvisheshanyavadi Ashtatayadi Tarini Jai Shri Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Ram Hare Krishna for another session, in particular after take all of you back for this Gita. Start over out. So before we begin with our topic, very however, before that, give a quick recap of what are the we have discussed from the 7th chapter onwards. So to begin with, in the 7th chapter, the title of the topic was Show Me God. It begins with Lord Shri Krishna speaking to Arjuna that Arjuna, if you want to know about me, the original creator who exists beyond this creation, and the creation which is billions and billions of years old, to know something which exists beyond it and which was created so long ago, how do we understand about that person? Krishna says, by hearing. And like this, the seventh chapter of Bhagavad Gita begins, where Lord Shri Krishna explains to Arjuna, Arjuna, I am the source of all. In fact, I am the absolute truth. Mataha paratram nanyat kinchidasti dhananjaya. There is no truth superior than I. Like this, Lord Shri Krishna establishes his supreme absolute position. And then in this section, we had discussed where people challenges, show me God. So how do we see God? We discussed about two principles. First, unseen is proven by the seen. And second, the principle of cause and effect. If there is an effect, there has to be a cause. After this, Arjuna began to wonder, my dear Lord, if you're all pervasive, you're the absolute truth, then why people are not able to understand you? Why people are not able to accept you? Then Lord Shri Krishna spoke about the concept of modes of material nature, which in the third and the final section of Bhagavad Gita, from chapter number 13 to 18, there in 14th, 17th and 18th chapter, Lord Shri Krishna would elaborate on this topic of modes of material nature. In essence, Krishna briefly said, Arjuna, everyone born in this material world is covered over by the curtain of illusion, which Krishna defines as modes of material nature. Oh, screen got changed. Like this. And then Lord Shri Krishna began to speak, Arjuna, if you want to see me, if you want to come out of it, then the way is to surrender. Devihi Yeshu Gunamai Mamamaya Duratya 7th chapter 14th verse. After that, Lord Shri Krishna spoke about four kinds of people who do not surrender to the Lord at all. Namam Dushkritanumura Prapadante Naradhama. Like this, Lord Shri Krishna described Mura, Naradhama, Asuram Bhavim Ashita. Like this, Krishna defines four kinds of categories of people who do not surrender to the Lord. And then Chaturvida Bhajante Mam Jana Sukritano Arjuna. Atho Arthati Jikyasu Gyani Cha Bharata Sabha. Four kinds of living entity, pious living entities who surrender to the Lord. One who is in distress, one who is desiring wealth, one is inquisitive, curious, and one is jnani. And then after that, establishing four kinds of people who surrender and do not surrender. And then Arjuna thought and asked or pondered, what about devatas? You're speaking about yourself. And the Lord Shri Krishna spoke about the position of the devatas. So in the final section of the 7th chapter, briefly we had discussed about the frequently asked question on the subject of devatas, the position of devatas, and why do people worship devatas? And why does Krishna in the 7th chapter call the worshippers of devatas as mudas, or less intelligent precisely? And all the subject matter was discussed in 7th chapter. And like that, 7th chapter ended, where finally conclusion was, which Krishna draw, the conclusion that worship of the Supreme Personality of God is the highest, because the devatas who bless you, even their power to bless you, bless us, comes from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So like this, in the 7th chapter, Lord Shri Krishna have established his absolute position and the importance of practicing Bhakti Yoga. And then it comes to the 8th chapter, where the key theme of discussion is death. Death is a subject matter which generally people don't want to talk about. It is considered to be an inconvenient truth, but rather, if we see from the right perspective, then death can become the right meditation, which can actually reinstate clarity and perspective into every aspect of life. Just to quote Steve Jobs, I believe all of you would have heard of his famous speech that he gave at the commencement, I believe commencement if I'm correct, of Stanford University program there. And there, Steve Jobs said, while addressing hundreds and thousands of students, he said, remember that you're going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. This was his, one of the opening statements. What a profound statement. If we know that we all gonna die, to know this truth avoids me from a trap that I have something to lose. We are already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart, yet we do indeed avoid it. Living in a society where death is sterilized, sanitized, and carefully sealed off from public view. According to statistics, almost 72% people die without even writing their own will. It's interesting why people would not write their will. Probably they never thought that they would have to face death. That's the point about it. So, death, although it's a subject matter which seems like demoralizing or pessimistic, however, the subject of death, if seen in the context of what Lord Shri Krishna teaches in Bhagavad Gita, can become the greatest lesson in our life. And like this, I would like to share 4 lessons from the topic of death. First, death reminds us of our priorities, those critical things which we have to pursue before the time runs out. Set your priorities. What are our priorities? Probably relationship, probably one's own health, one's own well-being. Today's most of the chaos outside and within individual is because of wrong set of priorities. This is a subject matter to discuss in detail, but that's the essence of it. So death can remind us of our right set of priorities, so we know that we attend to it before the time runs out, and then we only have regret to make. Second lesson that we can learn from it is death can teach us about gratitude. Through the lens of temporality, we perceive everything and everyone we complain about in a new light. In other words, once we know eventually everyone has to pass away, everyone has to give up this mortal frame, it can bring us a sense of gratitude for what we have received. Every morning when we wake up in the morning is an opportunity to express gratitude, knowing that I have another day to live. Many people probably in the previous night would not have woken up, but I have woken up. So I have another day to fulfill my life's mission. And the third lesson that death can teach us is death can counter laziness. There's no point in killing time once we realize that the time is actually killing us. Very important. There's no point in wasting time, because when time is wasted, it can never be recovered. And we all are approaching closer to our death. Fourth, and another thought or a reflection on the subject of death, it also brings fearlessness. In the face of permanent expiry, all our worries and anxieties pale into insignificance. The problem is death hasn't quite registered as of now. That's the only thing. So, knowing that everything which is born has to die, what is the point of fear? If it is a truth which we have to accept, knowing that we are eternal living being, we never take birth, never die, it is just a change of body, can definitely bring fearlessness in the heart of a living entity. And this is what the wisdom of Bhagavad Gita teaches us on the subject matter of death. Along with that, Lord Shri Krishna in the 8th chapter also talks about the law of transmigration. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tayajate ante kalevaram. Whatever you remember at the end of your life, according to thought, you get your next life. So Arjuna thought, my dear Lord, how do we attain you? How do we remember you so we can go back to you, to your abode, so we be liberated from this material suffering? Krishna said you have to follow 2 steps. One is abhyasa, second is anusmara. Abhyasa, which means the practice of devotional principles, and anusmara, practice the art of remembering Lord in the footsteps of predecessor Acharya. And then Lord Shri Krishna began to speak about that another world, which a living entity, which a person attains after getting moksha, or liberation. What is the destination of somebody who has attained moksha? Lord Krishna defines the destination is a spiritual world. And then there is a comparison between material world and the spiritual world in the 8th chapter, which finally concludes with what happens to those who are not following Bhakti Yoga. How do they attain moksha? For the Karma Yogis, for the Jnana Yogis, for the Ashtanga Yogis, how do they maneuver and are able to attain moksha? That is described, wherein Lord Shri Krishna sums up that it's very, very difficult to actually go beyond the coverings of the material world on one's own endeavor. However, somebody takes shelter of me by my mercy, I can pull that living entity from his drowning ocean very easily. And once again, 8th chapter ends with the glorification of the Bhakti Yoga and how Bhakti Yogi can easily transcend the modes of material nature and this world also. And then it brings us to the 9th chapter. What is this Bhakti Yoga all about? Where the chapter is titled as The Most Confidential Knowledge. Well, Lord Shri Krishna, after describing confidential, more confidential, finally speaks about the most confidential knowledge in the 9th chapter. Second chapter, he described the confidential knowledge and not the body but the spirit soul. From the 3rd chapter to the 6th chapter, Lord Shri Krishna described the more confidential knowledge, which is the path of yoga, by which one can reawaken one's forgotten relationship with the Lord. And in the 9th chapter, Lord Shri Krishna now describes the most confidential knowledge, which is the sweet relationship between the Lord and the devotee, and how Lord reciprocates towards the surrender of the devotee. Like that, the 9th chapter is kind of based on. And along with that, Lord Shri Krishna also describes 3 misconceptions about his position. There are 3 prominent misconceptions that different living entities have about the position of the Lord or position of the Lord Shri Krishna. First, some consider Lord Shri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, just a mere ordinary human being. Classic example, Duryodhan, Shishupala, Jayadratha, Jarasandh, and many others who were present who thought Krishna is just a mere human being. Dantavakra, etc. Second, some consider Supreme Lord and Devatas to be at the same level, to be equal in all aspects. That's another misconception. Third, some not being able to understand there is a Supreme Personality, there is a person beyond all this majestic or mystical creation, ultimately end up considering this nature, this cosmos to be unallowed. So such people worship mountains, trees, birds, animals, or the sun, moon, or the universe. Like this, these are 3 kinds of misconceptions that Lord Shri Krishna addresses and clarifies. And finally, Lord Shri Krishna, in the concluding section from verse number 25 to verse number 34, focuses on the sweet relationship between the devotee and the Lord, where Krishna says, Arjuna, I want you to declare, Name Bhaktya Pranashyati, that my devotee never perishes. And finally, Krishna concludes 9th chapter with, Manmana Bhava Madbhakta Madhyaji Mam Namaskaru. Absorb your mind in me by always remembering me, by always worshipping me, by always chanting my names, my glories. You'll always come back to me. Like that, Lord Shri Krishna concludes. Then Arjuna began the thought, my dear Lord, how do I absorb my mind in you always? And therefore, in the 10th chapter, the discussion is about the supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, where Lord Shri Krishna speaks the 4 essential verses of Bhagavad Gita, which is called as Chatushloki Bhagavad Gita, where Lord Shri Krishna establishes in the 8th verse, he is a source of all. Aham sarvasya prabhaho matha sarvam pravartate. Iti matva bhajante mam budabhava samanvitaha. I am the cause of all causes. One who knows about this science about me, naturally surrenders unto me. So Arjuna thought, my dear Lord, how does such a person behaves towards you when he knows you're the cause of all causes? And Lord Shri Krishna says, such a person engages in my devotional service day and night, and that is where he finds ultimate happiness in his life. Then how do you reciprocate to such a surrendered devotee? Then Lord Shri Krishna explains in the 10th and 11th verse, Tesham satatayuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogantam yena maam apiyantite. Hey Arjuna, for one who is always dedicated to serve me or to love me, to such a person, I give the intelligence by which he can come to me. I remove all the obstacles from his path. I make sure that he has no hindrance, no obstacle to go back to Godhead, to attain me in the next life, and no obstacles in his present life. Like this, Lord Shri Krishna promises Arjuna, one who knows the nature of the Lord and one who serves the Lord like that. And then finally, Arjuna acknowledges and boldly declares, my dear Krishna, you indeed are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. 10th chapter, 12th verse, Param Brahma Param Dhama Pavitram Paramam Bhavan Purusham Shashvatam Divyam Adi Devam Ajam Vibhu. My dear Lord, you're the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and I don't say it alone. I've heard it from the best of the sages like Narada, Vyasa, Asito, Devala, etc. You need of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and I accept you. And all in all, whatever you say, because I know you are my best well-wisher. However, ye dil mange more. I would still like to know more about your opulences. And then in the remaining section of the 10th chapter, Lord Shri Krishna points or kind of speaks about his 82 opulences, all in all. And after describing the different opulences, like I'm the taste of the water, among the mountains and the Himalayas, among the best of, in other words, when Krishna is highlighting this opulences, doesn't mean that he is that opulence, but he is a source of that opulence. That is a point that Krishna explains about. And finally, at the end of 10th chapter, Krishna says, Arjuna, what is the use of asking such question? What I have just told you is a fraction of the fraction of my opulences. My opulences are unlimited. Why? Because I pervade everywhere. I am omnipresent in the 10th chapter, 42 verse. And then Arjuna began to think, can I see that all-pervasive form? And now Arjuna is becoming more and more greedy to know about the Lord. And like that, the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, titled as Universal Form, begins. Although Krishna and Arjuna both are sitting on the chariot, yet Krishna tells Arjuna, although I am your charioteer right now, but I am simultaneously all pervasive, which inspires Arjuna to see that all pervasive form, where Lord Shri Krishna is once again going to show his universal form. Literally, in his lifetime, he kind of showed, I would not say exactly, but at least 3 times he showed about this. First to Mother Yashoda in her childhood days, when he showed the whole universe within his belly or within his mouth. Second to Duryodhan, when Lord Shri Krishna had gone as a peace messenger, although it was a partial manifestation. And now Krishna shows the form which Krishna himself tells Arjuna, what I'm about to show you, no one ever before has seen it. Probably no one ever in the future would ever see it. And like this, the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita begins. As usual, we always give an acronym for the chapter, and the acronym for this chapter is Rupa. I'll be a little quick with this and focus on certain key elements of this chapter. Maybe we may not go in all the details, considering the times that we have. So Arjuna said, my dear Lord, now as I know in truth, I have realized the truth about you. You're the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All my doubts are finished. Yet I have this hankering to see this all-pervasive form of yours. Why do I have this hankering? Because I know that you are all-pervasive. And like this, the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita begins.
Hare Krishna. There's some technical disturbances. We'll working on it. Prabhuji will be back soon. Why don't we use this slight hiccup in chanting Hare Krishna? I would request everyone chant at their side while Prabhuji will be back very soon.
Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Welcome back, Prabhuji.
All right, so don't worry. Now we are about to see the universal form. So Lord wanted to see how serious you are about it. So a little distraction happened. Hare Krishna. Okay. So here Arjuna makes a request. The question arises, why would Arjuna make a request to see a universal form when he is able to see the two-handed, the most sacred and the most rare form, when he already has Krishna present in front of him in all his opulences? why would then Arjuna ask for seeing the universal form? Or in other words, he asked, and why did Lord show the universal form? Very interesting reasons. It is mentioned in the purpose of Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada says, first, to establish the unequivocal supremacy of the Supreme Lord. Arjuna wanted to prove without doubt Krishna's position as the source of everything. He is a cause of Vishnu and not otherwise, and to establish Lord's divinity for all the time to come. Second, to set a criteria for any incarnation. There are many man-made incarnations who keep on appearing or popping up from within some families or some villages in India, saying that I am Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. If some family had three brothers, so they declare themselves to be Trinity. And somewhere, if boy and girl appears, then they say Brahma, Saraswati. So like that, there are different incarnations that appear. So if in case any incarnation you know of it, living incarnation right now, you can go and ask that person, please show your incarnation. I mean to say Virat Roop. 11th chapter, you showed Virat Roop to Arjuna, so why don't you show us? So that is a point that is described here to set a criteria. And why did Lord agree? Lord agreed because he wanted to please Arjuna. This is what the reciprocation between the Lord and the devotee. Devotee asked, and Lord, like a order supplier, he kind of agreed and he followed the advice of the Lord, followed the advice of Arjuna. And lastly, to encourage Arjuna to fight. Why? Because now when Krishna is going to show his universal form, actually he doesn't only show the universal form, he also shows the future to Arjuna through that universal form, where the whole army and the great warriors assembled at the battlefield, at least particularly at the side of Kauravas, Arjuna would see entering into the mouth of the universal form and being chewed alive, eaten alive by the universal form, and the blood dripping from the mouth of the universal form falling all over the battlefield. Seeing this terrific form, Arjuna would fall on the feet, fall on his knees, and would beg, would plead to the Lord, my dear Lord, enough for the horror show. I wanted to see a romantic movie. You turned into a horror show. Please come back to your two-handed form. That was very beautiful. This is extremely ghastly. All my desires are fulfilled. And that is how the 11th chapter builds. So, but let's take a look what happens. So in the second section of this chapter, 11th chapter, where U stands for universal form, from verse number 5 to 14, wherein Lord Shri Krishna begins to describe what is universal form. And Krishna agrees to his request, and he shows universal form. Where Krishna says, "My dear Arjuna, son of Pratha, see now my opulences, hundreds of thousands of very divine and multicolored forms like that." I will not be able to read all the translations. Presentation is already uploaded on student portal on the website. You can download and see it. In the 8th verse, Krishna says, "But Arjuna, you cannot see me with your present eyes. Therefore, I give you the divine eyes. Behold my mystic opulence." And then Sanjaya began to describe whom? To Dhritarashtra. What about this universal form? So Sanjaya describes. Now he's describing about something which is indescribable. If something is indescribable, how can it be described? It is a dichotomy. So therefore here Sanjaya tries to explain to his best of ability by making an analogy which Dhritarashtra can understand. And that is the use of analogy and metaphor in any language or any conversation. So here, Sanjaya will use analogy. So what does Sanjaya says? Hey Dhritarashtra, Arjuna saw in that universal form unlimited mouths, unlimited eyes, unlimited wonderful visions. The form was decorated with many celestial ornaments and bore many divine upraised weapons. He wore celestial garlands and garments, and many divine scents were smeared all over his body. All was wondrous, brilliant, unlimited, and all expanding. Just a side note, one of the devotee during Prabhupada time, when he read the description of universal form, he became very inspired by the universal form. He went to Srila Prabhupada and said, "Srila Prabhupada, I read your purport of the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. I'm so inspired by the universal form. Can I worship the universal form?" Prabhupada was surprised. Prabhupada said, "Where will you start? If you have to offer a garland, to which part will you offer garland? If you have to offer bhoga to him, how much will you offer? If you have to dress him, from where would you start dressing and where would you end? And then that devotee understood, actually, we really cannot render any personal service to the universal form because he's unlimited. Therefore, we cannot have that sweet exchange, just like Arjuna was having with Krishna. So he understood it is necessary, it is important to develop awe and reverence for the Supreme Lord, but for personal reciprocation, it is not possible. So, like this, now he gives an analogy. Coming back to the discussion, Sanjay says, if hundreds of thousands of suns were to rise at once into the sky, their radiance might resemble the effulgence of the Supreme Person in that universal form. You getting the point here now? So the effulgence of the universal form was so much. So this is the best you could describe. If thousands of the sun would rise together, maybe then it might resemble the effulgence of the universal form. So when Arjuna saw this universal form, how did he respond? Immediately, Arjuna bowed his head to offer obeisances with folded hands, and he began to pray to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which brings us to the third section of the 11th chapter, prayers of Arjuna, from verse number 15 to verse number 45. In 15th verse, Arjuna says, "My dear Lord, I see assembled in your body all the demigods and various other living entities. I see Brahma sitting on the lotus flower, as well as Lord Shiva and all the sages and divine serpents." I intentionally included this particular verse among all the verses that we have here. It's very interesting. For those who think all devtas are alike, are same, this particular verse straightforward debunks that idea. Arjuna saw all the devtas being present in the within the body of the universal form, which means they're the subset of the Supreme Lord, not the superset or not the same set like that. And like this, Arjuna begins to glorify, begins to kind of offer his prayers to this majestic, magnificent, unending, unlimited universal form of the Lord. And then Arjuna explains that how he's able to see the whole universe within that form. So what he saw is not possible for me to show you, but maybe I can try to explain you something about how what is Vedic cosmology, or what is the Vedic understanding of the universe. How many of you are okay if I spend some time to explain to you what Arjuna saw in terms of Vedic cosmology? Yes, no? What our audience is saying accordingly? Huh? Oh, there's a delay. Okay. All right. So I guess I'll take it for granted that you would like to know about the Vedic cosmology, how the universe looks like. I'll proceed ahead because it looks like there is a delay. So what is a Vedic universal map? Very, very interesting subject. I'm just giving you a trailer of it, okay? By the way, in our morning Bhagavatam classes, we are discussing this whole subject itself. So what is a Vedic universal map? It begins with Lord Shri Krishna, who is the cause of all causes, who expands as Balram. Balramji expands as Chaturvyu, Vasudev, Anirudh, Sankarshan, and Pradyumna. Then this Sankarshan expands as Narayana, and Narayana further expands into Chaturvyu incarnation of Vishnu's Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Anirudh. And then Sankarshan expands as Mahadev or Lord Shiva. That's the reason Lord Shiva is said to be a devotee of Sankarshan. And that same Sankarshan also expands as Mahavishnu, which is also called as Karana Daksha Vishnu. And then Karana Daksha Vishnu expands as Garbho Daksha Vishnu. And Garbho Daksha Vishnu expands as Shiro Daksha Vishnu, which is Paramatma. Because I have discussed this subject matter twice, so I'm not going into details of this whole hierarchy. But let's see what all I can cover again. So Krishna actually expands into three Vishnus, which is called as Purusha Avatar. Mahavishnu, from whose breathing, when he breathes out, all the universes manifest. So one devotee was making a nice comment. Thank God, Lord Shri Krishna, Mahavishnu, is not performing, the yogic breathing exercises. You have that Kapal Bhatti, something, right? That you sit straight, who you do it. If imagine Mahavishnu lying in the ocean doing Kapal Bhatti, whatever you call it. Kamal Vatira. So, we'll be going in, coming out, going. So good Krishna is in yoga, Vishnu is in yoga nidra, and he breathes out, and then slowly breathes in. That's good. That's good. Second is Garbhodaksha Vishnu. Then Mahavishnu expands as Garbhodaksha Vishnu, who enters into the every universe which is expanding from Mahavishnu, who lies into the causal ocean, where this whole universe is filled with half water, Garbhodak ocean. Lying in that ocean, from Garbha of this Vishnu manifest Brahma. And this whole lotus on which Brahma appears, and the stem of that lotus is where you have 14 planetary system. And then, as you can see in the picture also, there is from the navel of Vishnu comes the lotus on which Brahma is born, and that is said to be the first living entity into the universe. And then Garbhodaya Vishnu also expands as Shira Daksha Vishnu, who enters as Paramatma in the living, in the heart of every living entity. We'll discuss in detail about Paramatma in the 13th chapter. Some references: Bhagavad Gita 9.8, Krishna says, "The whole cosmic order is under me. Under my will, it is automatically manifested again and again. Under my will, it is annihilated at the end." That is a function of Karanadakshay or Mahavishnu. Krishna further says, this is actually from Srimad Bhagavatam, where it is said, while Mahavishnu sleeps within the causal ocean, innumerable universes, golden seeds are generated along with this breathing. Then there are 14 planetary systems, as we have described, at the when the lotus comes from the navel of Garbhodaksha Vishnu. So the middle of it is Bhuloka. Below that, there are lower planetary systems. Above that are said to be heavenly planetary systems. These are the name of. So below Bhuloka, which is our earthly planetary system, below that is Atala, Sutala, Mahatal, Talatal, Rasatal, and Patal. And above Bhuva, Swarga, Mahar, Jana, Tapa, and Satyalok. This is how the 14 planetary system are there in this universe. At the topmost, Satyaloka is the abode of Lord Brahma, like that. This is the structure of our universe, which is by all means beyond the comprehension of the modern science. They're still discovering the lives, the different living forms on this planet. So, what is the question of studying the whole universe like that? So, Shiradaksha Vishnu, the third Vishnu, lays in the Shweta which is beyond the 14 planetary system, and he expands as Paramatma in the heart of every living entity. That is a point about it. Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter, verse number 13, Krishna says, Gama Vishya Bhutani Dharayami Hamojasa. So, what is keeping all these cosmic elements or entities in the universe in their own respective position? Krishna says, I enter into each planet, and by my energies they stay in orbit. So, who is the creator of law of gravity? Newton, isn't it? He created the law of gravity from the fallen apple. No, not at all. He discovered it. The law of gravity existed. It's not that before that particular day when the apple fell from the tree, never before than that, apple never fell. It's not that before that if you threw anything in the sky, it would never come back. So law of gravity was always there. This is a reference from Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says, I am the one who created the law of gravity. 10th chapter, verse number 41. Yad yad vibhutimas sattvam shrimad urjitam evava tattad evavagachitvam mama tejam sambhavam. Know that all opulent, beautiful, and all glorious creations spring from but a spark of my splendor. Like this, Lord Shri Krishna explains about his supremacy, being the cause and the creator of this whole universe. And we just try to briefly introduce you this whole subject matter of the Vedic understanding of the universe. And this is what all Arjuna saw in the universal form. And then Arjuna, looking at everyone entering into the mouth of this universal form, getting crushed, butchered, and the whole army of Pandavas' car was destroyed, Arjuna becomes terrified, petrified, and he said, who are you? I have never ever seen such a ferocious form in my life. My heart is throbbing. I feel like I'll get a heart attack. It's too dangerous. Please, I beg you, please tell me who are you? Arjuna was so perplexed. He got so emotionally disturbed. He forgot that he's speaking to Krishna. That is what fear does to one. And now, Arjuna, please, can you kindly introduce yourself who you are? And this Viratu speaks, I am time, Kala Rupa. I destroy everything. Like time cycle, birth, growth, you have the maintenance, then you have byproducts, then dwindle and death. So whatever takes birth has to die. Whatever is created must have an expiry date. Krishna says, Kalosmim lokas kasya krat pravriddho loka samahartam iha pravartaha. I'll not go into the whole verse. The point is, Kalosmi. Arjuna, I am the time. Time is none other than my own energy. And as a time, I destroy everything. Therefore, Lord Shri Krishna says in the 33rd verse, therefore, O Arjuna, get up, prepare to fight and win glory, conquer your enemies and enjoy a flourishing kingdom. They are already put to death by my arrangement, and you, O Sabyasachi, can be but an instrument in the fight. Become an instrument. A very, very important subject what Lord Shri Krishna talks about becoming an instrument. Krishna says about the time factor, the force that Paramatma uses to run the material world. Through the time factor, the destruction of the Kuru has already been arranged. In other words, Krishna says, Arjuna, become an instrument, which means by the Lord's will, everything has already been destined. Arjuna, it is up to you to become the recipient of my mercy by being the instrument. If you do so, you get my favor. If not, even if you become an instrument or not, my will would anyways be fulfilled, either through you or someone else. Choice is yours. If you want to make your life glorious, become an instrument at the hand of the Lord. If not, you may live and die inglorious. May live inglorious and die have an inglorious death. His choice is yours, but my will definitely be fulfilled like that. So direct versus indirect, Lord Shri Krishna explains how through his energies like Kala factor, Lord has control on everything. Where Krishna is trying to tell Arjuna, simply fight. Don't be disturbed by seeing your relatives standing opposite to you. I promise you, you will be able to vanquish your enemies in battle. So Prabhupada writes a very beautiful purport to the 33rd verse, where Prabhupada talks about the plan of this world. Prabhupada says, there is a specific plan being carried out in this material world. What is the plan? This cosmic manifestation is a chance for the conditioned soul to go back to Godhead, back to home. As long as they have the domineering mentality which makes them try to lord it over material nature, they are conditioned. But anyone who can understand the plan of the Supreme Lord and cultivate Krishna consciousness is most intelligent. So what is the plan of this world? This world is like a university. It's a cosmic university created by the Lord to teach us important life lessons which inspires us to quit this world and go back to Godhead. And to be able to succeed in our exam, the final exam, that is the death, it all depends on how much we have become Krishna conscious. And that is the plan of this world. So what is the plan of the Lord and plan of his devotee? Then Srila Prabhupada writes in the 34th verse purport, very important purpose actually. We'll discuss the subject matter in detail when we go into the deeper study of Bhagavad Gita. This is right now kind of a synopsis what we are discussing here. Prabhupada writes, every plan is made by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he is so kind and merciful to his devotees that he wants to give credit to his devotees who carry out his plan according to his desires. Life should therefore move in such a way that everyone acts in Krishna consciousness and understands the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the medium of a spiritual master. Like Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur told Srila Prabhupada and many other disciples, that please preach this message of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has already said, every town and village, the glories of Lord Shri Krishna would be sung. It is up to you how seriously you take this instruction and try to apply. If you become the instrument of Lord's mercy, then your life would be glorious. If you doubt the instruction of the Lord and if you don't cooperate with the plan of the Lord, then you may live your life, but you will not be known or glorified as a devotee for the rest of the time in the world, for one who saved the whole world. Srila Prabhupada, while writing this purport, actually did that. He followed the instruction of his spiritual master as his life and soul, Having found faith in his spiritual master instruction in the words of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he actually became the right recipient of the Lord's mercy because he became a humble servant of his spiritual master. Therefore, he became a perfect instrument at the hands of the Lord to spread and establish Krishna consciousness all over the world. In today's time, now, when Srila Prabhupada went abroad, that was a very tumultuous time and period in the history. 1960s, 65, there was the Vietnam War, there's the India-China War, Pakistan War, war all over the place, and there was a conflict between India, or the USSR and US. There was all the chance of Third World War on top of it. And the European countries, there was hippie movement going on, and there was a conflict between there was a racial discrimination. There were a lot of movements were going on, women liberation movement, the racial discrimination, stop racial discrimination, whatnot. In that tumultuous time, Srila Prabhupada actually did something which has never ever been done in the history of the mankind. One old man at the age of 70 and beyond, traveling all over the world, inspiring people to give up bad habits. To make people more sinful is very easy. To make people violent on the name of religion, to inspire them on the false promises of you will get this and this advantage if you die on the name of God, because in heaven some ladies are waiting for you, etc., etc. That's very easy to tempt people with the gross material objects by giving that false promises. But here, Srila Prabhupada was speaking about something which, unless you start living a pure life, cannot have an experience, which means first you give up bad habits, then you will have an experience. Is a miracle in itself. It's not an easy thing. Finally, when Arjuna heard Lord Shri Krishna's answer to his question, he actually became
Hare Krishna, we may have some technical issue. So team is working on it. I think Prabhuji should be back very soon.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Sanjaya said in the 35th verse, all right. O king, after hearing these words from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the trembling Arjuna offered obeisances with folded hands again and again, and he fearfully spoke to Lord Shri Krishna in a faltering voice as follows, where Arjuna began to offer prayers to the Lord, and he said, my dear Lord, thank you so much for showing your universal form. It was a fantastic PowerPoint show with a lot of visuals that you showed me. Some were really ghastly, some were very terrific. So my request is, can you please come back to your two-handed form? That was a nice. So I like that. So that is what happens here. And this is the prayer that Arjuna makes, to which Lord agrees again. And now Lord will return back to his two-handed form. So here it is mentioned that Arjuna begs forgiveness. And a very important, beautiful purport Prabhupada writes to the 41st and 42nd purport, that how Krishna relates to his devotees. Prabhupada writes, but Krishna is so kind and merciful that in spite of such opulence, he played with Arjuna as a friend, because Arjuna begs forgiveness. Oh, my dear Lord, I didn't know about your opulences. I used to treat you as my friend. Sometimes, they both will sleep on the same bed, where Arjuna would put his feet on the chest of the Lord. And while remembering all those situations, or sometimes Arjuna would call Krishna as Sakha, very casually. So Arjuna says, how can I call someone like you, who is so incredible, who's the object of my worship? I have handled you so roughly and so loosely. That's how Arjuna began to ask for forgiveness. And Prabhupada writes, Krishna is so kind. Although he is the master of all opulences, yet he played with Arjuna as his friend. And that is what Krishna likes, to reciprocate in different rasas. And therefore, Arjuna is lamenting his previous over-familiar relationship with Krishna. And now we come to the last section of this 11th chapter, where A stands for armed form, in verse number 46 to 55, wherein Lord Shri Krishna, while manifesting his universal form, now will show his four-handed form of Vishnu or Narayan, and then finally show his two-handed form, wherein Lord Shri Krishna tells Arjuna, Arjuna, this form of mine which you're seeing now as a two-handed Krishna is the rarest of all. And it is only possible for those whose eyes are tinged with pure devotion. Otherwise, nobody can see it. Duryodhan saw, Shakuni saw, Karna saw, Jayadatra saw, Shishupal, Dantravakra, so many of them saw, but they could not see Krishna as Krishna. They saw Krishna as a mere human being. And that is what Lord Shri Krishna explains. So, in this concluding section, there are 2 or 3 or 4 very important principles being discussed, which we'll quickly highlight. Very first thing that we learn is that all forms come from Krishna. Why? Because universal form manifested from whom? From Krishna. And then the four-handed Narayan form manifested from whom? Krishna. And finally, Krishna showed his two-handed form. So this chapter, for once for all, puts this debate to end. Who is supreme? Is the universal form supreme? Is the Vishnu supreme or Krishna supreme? This chapter actually tells all forms manifest from Sri Krishna. This is not only the verdict of Bhagavad Gita, Lord Shri Krishna himself, even the best of the sages like Vyasadeva, Sukadeva Goswami, etc., they speak that yes, Krishna is the source of all. This is a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam where it is said, Etacham sakalha pumsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Among all these incarnations which I have described to you until now, O Parishit Maharaj, in all that incarnation, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, where Rama, Narasimha, Vamana, Varaha, Ityadi, many other incarnations were discussed. But Sukadeva Goswami says to Parikshit, however, Etachams Kalap, Krishnastu Bhagavan, but Krishna is indeed the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Not only this, we learn the same thing in the prayers of Brahma, which is called as Brahma Samhita, where Brahma says, Brahma and all of the lords of the mundane worlds appearing from the pores of hairs of Mahavishnu remain alive as long as the duration of one exhalation. So this is a verse which actually Brahma spoke, which talks about how the creation happens from the breathing of Mahavishnu. That's the first point, that all forms manifest from Krishna. Second, there are different processes to know absolute truth. First, there is a materialistic calculation of the Supreme Lord. There they think the Lord is impersonal, and when he comes to this world, he gets a form from the modes of material nature. In other words, he gets covered over by the modes of material nature. However, in this section, Lord Shri Krishna very categorically mentions, and Prabhupada explains in the purport, to consider Krishna to be a great historical personality or an ordinary person, or even though he was so powerful but had to accept a material body, or ultimately absolute truth is impersonal, is all but nothing a material conception of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Second, speculative calculation of the Supreme Lord, wherein it is explained those who are in search of the absolute truth based on their own knowledge and strength, somehow they fail to approach the personal form of the Lord. They consider his personal form to be less important than the universal form, thinking personal form of the Supreme to be imaginary and universal form to be real. However, what is the best way to understand the Supreme Lord? The third process, which is described as a transcendental process, which is Tadavidi Pranipatena Pariprashnena Sevya. If you want to know about the Supreme Lord, in fact, Krishna himself said, Arjuna, if you want to know about me, Tachnu, you hear from me. Now, you and I may not have direct access to Krishna, but we do have access to Bhagavad Gita. But what is the use of it? None of us know Sanskrit language, so we cannot understand. Even though we have Bhagavad Gita, we cannot understand. So how do we know what Krishna said? It is only possible if the wisdom has come in the disciplic succession, just like Krishna spoke to Arjuna. Similarly, if the disciplic succession was there to maintain the integrity of the words and instruction of Lord Shri Krishna, then we can get to know even today, 5,000 years later on, what Krishna taught Arjuna. And that is what is the transcendental process, which is also called as descending process, through the bona fide disciplic succession to hear and understand about the Supreme Personality Godhead. Therefore, when you look at the introduction of Srila Prabhupada's commentary to Bhagavad Gita, at the end of introduction, before chapter 1 begins, Srila Prabhupada have listed down the whole disciplic succession to which Srila Prabhupada belongs to, which actually begins from Lord Shri Krishna himself. Finally, Lord Shri Krishna concludes the chapter where Lord Shri Krishna says, Arjuna, The form that you're seeing now is the most rare of rare, and it is only revealed through the pure devotional service, which is nothing but bhakti yoga. Once again, Lord Shri Krishna glorifies the practice of bhakti yoga. And if you see at the end of every chapter, what is Bhagavad Gita teaching? Bhakti yoga, bhakti yoga, bhakti yoga. If despite hearing all the 18 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, if we don't understand one thing, that we need to practice bhakti yoga, then it says खोदा पहाड़ निकली चुईया, which means पूरी रामायण खत्म होगी, व्यक्ति पूछता है सीता कौन थी. It would be something like that. So I hope all of you getting the gist that we all need to practice bhakti yoga, which begins with ABCD. Take regular association of saintly people, read wisdom literature, which means books, see for chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra. D refers to diet, that is Krishna Prashadam, like that. And in the last verse of this chapter, Lord Shri Krishna explains the qualities of pure devotional service, which I would not discuss at this point of time. It's a subject matter in itself, but something for us to know about the pure devotional service that Lord Himself establishes the aspects of pure devotional service at the end of the 11th chapter. With that, we come to the conclusion of this 11th chapter, titled as the Universal Form, where the key subject matter was Arjuna's request and Lord Shri Krishna agreeing to that request. So nobody can order Krishna, just like some atheist says, if God exists, I order him to come in front of me and show himself. No, the Lord is not order supply for fools like this. Arjuna was a devotee of the Lord, and Lord felt obliged. So if Lord is pleased, Lord is willing to follow the orders or the desires of the devotee. In this case, as we saw, Arjuna ordered or requested, and Krishna obliged. Why did Krishna show his universal form? Why did Arjuna ask? We discussed that. And then we saw how the Lord, this universal form of the Lord, is a source of all, not the source of all. In other words, we got to know that Krishna is a source of all. From Krishna only universal form came, from Krishna only 400 Vishnu form came. And then we also learn about there are different ways of approaching the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One is through the speculative way, one considering him, one is a materialistic calculation, considering him to be an ordinary human being. Other is through the speculative way, trying to understand God through our own means. But the best means of understanding the absolute truth of the Supreme Lord is through bona fide Guru Parampara. And in the end, 11th chapter, Lord Shri Krishna once again established the glories of Bhakti Yoga. So in essence, 11th chapter once again establishes the supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, where the 11th chapter concludes with, in the beginning, Arjuna requested for the universal form. However, in the end, he requested for the Lord to show his human-like form. Around his neck was swinging a garland of flowers beautified with the moon locket, whose two hands are adorned with the flute and the jeweled ornaments, whose graceful threefold bending form attracts the mind of his devotees. Ancient Sanskrit texts describe Krishna as Rasovahisaha. Rasovahisaha means he is the embodiment of affectionate relationships, loving relish, and transcendental sweetness. God is a person who is full of color, character, and bliss. He knows how to have fun, good time, and is much more interested in relishing the sweetness of pure love than just to receive the ritualistic worship of those who have faith in rituals alone, or those who only know how to approach him in awe and reverence. And through the commentaries of Srila Prabhupada, translation of Srila Prabhupada, we all have gained access to the secret or the wisdom of Bhagavad Gita, wherein we all have been provided an opportunity to develop one-on-one relationship with such a sweet, loving person, Rasovaisaha, who is the epitome of all kind of rasas. And we have that opportunity in the form of developing a loving relationship with the Lord. And that is just an essence of the 11th chapter. So tomorrow, when we meet, we'll be discussing now of the subject of spiritual qualities. In other words, those who are practicing the bhakti culture, how they cultivate wonderful spiritual qualities. And what are those spiritual qualities that a devotee must have, must possess, if someone is worshipping the Supreme Personality of God? Many times people have a doubt, oh, so and so, my uncle and aunt has been doing puja for all their life, but I don't see a tinge of difference in their attitude or behavior. They're still rough, they're still angry, they still get mad, and etc. etc. But here in this chapter, we learn about some qualities, very important qualities. If we cultivate, Krishna is very pleased. And when we try to please Krishna, we naturally and automatically cultivate these qualities. We'll speak about on the subject more tomorrow. With that, we thank you all for joining us for today. And do excuse us for that sudden 2-day break that I had to give in the previous 2 days. But now we'll be going at a stretch to cover this whole subject matter. So thank you so much. Shikhar Prabhu, back to you. In case if anyone has a question on the subject matter of universal form as we discussed today. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Thank you so much for this wonderful session, explaining quite well like how the universal form and how one can perceive it, although it's inconceivable. Okay, so Prabhuji, I have one announcement to make, and then we'll move to question answers. So as you all know, we have a Pune website where we upload quizzes on all the chapter that is discussed so far, and based on that, we have find out. Evolved, and there are very interesting quizzes answers given by all of you, and we selected like few of those high scoring participants. So I would like to announce the name for them. Okay, so first of all, congratulations to all top scorers. So this is based on chapter 1 to 6. The first one is Sheshti Sena. You can see it's also coming in our banner. And Rohit Bhalerao. Many congratulations. Then Aishri Fani Sushma ji. Many congratulations. Dr. A.V. Raghavendra Rao, Deepak Yadav. Both of you, very congratulations. And the last two are Marshall Kaur and Naman Kohli. So wonderful participation. There are around 80 participants, and these are some of the high scoring candidates that we selected. So do take part. If you are not registered, we registered in Evolve Pune website. We have interesting quizzes coming up for all the chapters, like from 7 to 12 now. So go to the website and log in. Now it's a time to take question answers.
We do have questions on this subject.
Yes, Prabhuji. Yeah, we
right.
have.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm putting first question. So there's Ramdev who's asking, shloka number 50, Bhagwan Krishna shows it's mentioned in the meaning of this verse 50, that Krishna shows his original four-handed form. So the question was, its original is two-handed form or four-handed form?
So original is two-handed form. In other words, I don't know exactly. I have to look at the verse. I don't have Bhagavad Gita in front of me right now. But what it means, original four-handed form is, that's also his form, right? Now, question is, if Krishna's original form is Vishnu, then how Krishna, who's in two-handed form standing in front of Arjuna, can show the original form of Vishnu, isn't it? Think about it. So the simple logic. If Vishnu's form is original, then from that Krishna form can manifest, not other way around. So I don't know what's the word here which is being used here. I'll take a look when at the end of the program what does exact Sanskrit says. But what it means, Krishna showed his four-handed form, which means the Vishnu form. That's the point here. All right. In case if any one of you have, or those who have asked, the one who has asked the question, if you have the translation of Srila Prabhupada's commentary, then you can share it here. We can look at it. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. So moving to next question is by Neela Shyamji. Why did Lord Krishna reveal his Vishwarupa to a sinner like Duryodhana?
Well, that was also a kindness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead to make, first of all, why did Krishna go as a peace messenger? Is the same question what you're asking here. Draupadi became very upset when Krishna decided and Yudhishthira agreed for Krishna to go as a peace messenger. In fact, Draupadi came and tried stopping Krishna that how can you do so? Now she was upset for different reasons. One of the reasons was she was worried about the security and well-being of Krishna. She knew how cruel the Duryodhana and the party is, and she said, "My dear Lord, you're going with a good heart, good intention. We all know, you know very well that this person is not going to change. Is not going to agree to anyone. You going there would put your life also at risk." Now, some of you think, "Arey, Draupadi knows he's a supreme personality," but the nature of love is such, just like Mother Yashoda, despite Krishna showing the whole universe within his belly, yet Mother Yashoda thought of Krishna as her son. That's the nature of love. Just like mother and son relationship or daughter relationship, how old you become for a mother, you're always a child, isn't it? So that's the nature of love. Fine. So Krishna said something very profound at that point of time. Krishna said, "Draupadi, I have to go. And the reason is, if I don't go now, people will say in the future that I was responsible for the war. I had planned it out. But I want to show that neither I nor Yudhishthir is responsible for the war. It is only the sinful Duryodhan who is not willing to follow the path of Dharma. Forget the follow the path of Dharma, even not willing to make a compromise where Yudhishthir have putting forward a proposal just to give 5 villages, so that later on in the future, when people get to know the consequences of the war, no one should blame Pandavas or I. The blame should go to Duryodhan." So that was the reason Lord Shri Krishna went as a peace messenger. And when Duryodhan, when Viduji and not Viduji wasn't there that time, when actually Duryodhan saw that how Krishna is rebuking, chastising Duryodhan, and he saw Dhritarashtra is becoming, changing his sides, gradually agreeing with Krishna. That time, Duryodhan, who had already planned, he knew, Krishna would be able to convince Dhritarashtra. So he had already planned that we'll arrest Krishna. If we arrest Krishna, the Pandavas would be morally defeated and there would not be any war. So, seeing that plan, Lord Shri Krishna grew up in size. So, it is said he showed a universal form, but not the universal form which Krishna showed to Arjuna. Very categorically, it is mentioned in 11th chapter. Krishna says, "Arjuna, what form I am showing you, never ever before anyone has seen it." Even for Arjuna, he needed a divine vision to see the universal form. So, how can a sinner like Duryodhan could see that form? And now, something very interesting. Although Duryodhan saw something incredible, yet what he concluded? This Krishna is such a magician, he knows what magic trick to play. He still could not understand the divinity of the Lord. And more amazing than that is Dhritarashtra, who got the live commentary from Sanjay about what is happening in the battlefield, how Krishna have showed his universal form. And now at the end of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna have risen up on his chariot and is ready to fight. Yet Dhritarashtra did not say, "Let me call off the fight." He was still convinced. So such is the nature of the sinful people. I hope this answers. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you. So taking up next question is from Vivek Prabhu. He's asking, are there two different Sankarshana as per the universal name?
Yes, this is a little technical, but yes. There's two expansions, just like you have two Chaturvya expansion. Yes, it is like that.
Okay, Prabhu. So next question is from Ashish. He's asking, if bhakti is a central message of a Gita, then why there are so many chapters of Jnana Yoga also?
So, see, Jnana Yoga, there are three essential components of Bhagavad Gita: Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. Karma Yoga refers to engaging your senses to serve the Lord. And Jnana Yoga refers to cultivating knowledge about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga can actually be yoga when there is a bhakti component in it. So, bhakti is a culmination. Bhakti is the thing that we need to be cultivating. And how do we cultivate? Both through the basis of Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga. In the sense, you engage your senses because our senses need engagement. We cannot sit idle. And so does our mind needs engagement. So, therefore, the science of Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga is established for us to come to an understanding. See, just like in the beginning of 7th chapter, Lord Shri Krishna says, "Hear from me." Now, what is the importance of hearing? As we cultivate knowledge, to that degree, our faith becomes strengthened and strong. As our faith becomes strong and strengthened, to that degree, we are willing to act on what we have learned, isn't it? Therefore, we need to cultivate jnana also, the knowledge about the absolute truth. So, therefore, jnana yoga is essential. But jnana without bhakti is of no use. That is the essence, or that is the gist. So if we are cultivating knowledge, if that cultivation knowledge do not yield good qualities like humility, surrender to Guru, worship of Lord Shri Krishna, that knowledge, all that knowledge that you have cultivated is useless, no use. Hare Krishna. Is there anything
Hare
else?
Krishna Prabhuji, I think there's one last question from Jyotiji. Did Dhritarashtra also see Vishwarup of Krishna through Sanjay?
He heard. He heard. Sanjay was speaking. So he saw the Vishwarup through his ears. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I think, yeah, that's it, Prabhuji. We have exhausted all the questions. Thank you so much for this wonderful session and taking questions now. Do you have anything
Okay.
else? Let us know or post it in our WhatsApp group. Reach out if you have any doubt in the chapter so far. Hare Krishna.
All right. So thank you so much for joining in for another session. Tomorrow we meet for the 12th episode. And on the coming Sunday, we have Ekadashi. So every Ekadashi, we have a special program. Announcements will follow probably tomorrow. Thank you once again. Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.